Yeah. Okay, the Jentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Jentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello, and welcome to the Jentry Podcast. Today, we have an incredible guest, and I mean this is going to be a good one. We have Owen McCarthy, who is an entrepreneur, an innovator, and a long-term resident of Maine. And more importantly than that, he's actually running for governor of Maine. So we're going to get into his story, his journey, and then his vision for Maine in a few seconds. But before we do that, Owen, how are you doing today?
I'm excited to be here. I'm joining you here from Maine, no surprise. And I'm looking forward to talking to you and your listeners about why this is one of the greatest states in the country and how we can make it even better.
Well, there it is. That makes it easy for me. My viewers know I like to jump straight into the tough issues. So what is the special sauce of Maine? What makes it the best place to live in America?
Well, one interesting fact about Maine that will describe like why it's a great place. It's the only state in the country that was settled west to east. And so we have the wild, wild east, which many Mainers don't know it as that. But what that means is we are rugged people that have built communities that you have to work together and that care about each other. We have the mountains to the sea. We have the fourth largest coastline in America. If you stretch it out, if you take it and stretch it out, this craggy coast. We have potatoes and lobster. And then in the last bit of time, we become some sort of a haven for people that work in tech and life science and maritime innovation and advanced forest products that have moved here to work remotely, and they're starting companies here. And so from that, from the culture of these like kind, community-driven, rugged people that has what it takes to get it done, to the migration in and the build it yourself attitude that's here, that we have tech, to the rugged coastline, like it's a great place to be. And I would bet their best decades are in front of us in Maine, and we're gonna grow responsibly over the next few decades for sure.
And I love that, and I definitely want to dig into that. I've been able to follow your journey and follow what you're saying about Maine and how life sciences are going to be so important to that. So I definitely want to get into that. But before you learn about a city or state, I think learning about their potential leadership is just as important. So did you always know that you wanted to be governor or mayor? Did you always know public service was going to be a fit for you? What was your childhood like, and how did this play into what you're doing now?
No, it's interesting. I grew up in rural Maine. And so I grew up about 100 miles north of Bangor, which is considered northern Maine, but is actually in the central part of the state. A town of about 1,000 people. And my dad, I actually grew up in this like little trailer on my grandfather's land. My dad was a logger. My mom stayed at home with us and then, was a lunch lady at the school. And, growing up, schools were good. I had a great example. My parents, who barely finished high school, like were good leaders unto their own right and really instilled in me the value of hard work. My dad would leave at 2 a.m., come home at 6 p.m. every day, would work on Saturdays, would rest on Sundays, which usually involved football. My mom you learned about kindness and community when you watch someone like my mom navigate the grocery store and is always like chatting with everyone and checking in and see how they're doing. And because in a small town, that's what you do. And you also learn grit and resilience. And so like that was where I grew up, very meager, modest beginnings, had every path in front of me. To your question, did I know I wanted to be governor? No, I just like to learn new things. I was curious. I cared about my fellow Mainer. I do remember a moment in high school, Jonathan, where Mr. Duffy, my physics teacher, was going around the room and was like telling everyone what they're going to be when they grow up, which is probably a dangerous exercise if someone doesn't want to be that, right? And he looks at me and he's like, Owen, you're going to be governor of the state someday. And it wasn't like a maniacal plan from that point forward, but it's a seed that was planted that has been watered and fed as I've gone on and had success in my life. and being able to build companies and serve on boards of the University of Maine trustees and do a lot of things, and then give back to the next generation, that seed that Mr. Duffy planted has grown rapidly.
Oh, and that is so crazy. So believe it or not, you're not the first person to tell me that. And to all the teachers out here watching, like, the words that you speak into your students are very powerful. I was on interviewing the mayor of Hudson, New York. And
Yeah.
he said, and he was like, his teacher said, everybody listens to you, so you have to do the right thing. You're like the mayor of the classroom. And it just stuck. So, Mr. Duffy, thank you so
Shout out to
much.
Mr. Duffy. He also got me into golf, which I became terrible at. So I wasted a lot of time doing golf. But no, Mr. Duffy was my physics teacher, was my assistant basketball coach, was my golf coach, and also taught me calculus. So Mr. Duffy was an important member of my life for sure.
Wow. Well,
Actually, it's a reminder, Jonathan. I was telling someone this story at a dinner, and they looked at me and they said, "Owen, you ever told Mr. Duffy this? Like how important he was to your life?" This is prior to running for governor. I was telling him about all the other things like Mr. Duffy. I was like, no. He's like, well, don't you think Mr. Duffy would want to know how important? So like for anyone out there that's listening, that you've ever had someone that's been that influential, that you bring them up and you talk about them, you should probably tell them about that. That's gonna mean a lot to them, that you could have a different. So I've fixed it. I've let them know that. But I think it's a good lesson for everyone.
absolutely. Everybody probably has one teacher, coach, mentor that they speak about, but they haven't reached out to. So I definitely encourage that. Now, you've done so much and you've been very successful in your life. Now, how do you translate some of the success you had in the private sector, obviously, in working with working with people that needed help from MedTech or
Yeah.
medical innovation. So how do you kind of bring that innovation and success there into the public sector?
Well, it's a good question, Jonathan. Let me continue my journey up to MedRhythms real quick. So like left Pat in Maine, I went to the University of Maine. I studied engineering. That was an impactful part of my life. I actually went and worked in the pulp and paper industry for a while, which in Maine is our heritage industry. It's been decimated over the years, but it's one of the things we were known for. I have a deep background in that. Went on to Boston. My wife was in optometry school, went to business school, started a 3D printing of electronics company. So innovative entrepreneur, background there. Following that, I started MedRhythms, and MedRhythms helps improve walking after a stroke. We started in Boston. We moved into Maine. We raised $60 million in venture capital, got through clinical trials, FDA, got a Medicare code. Company is growing rapidly. It's going great. All the while, and I will get to your question in a second, but all the while was because of how important UMaine was to me, was chair of the board of visitors at the University of Maine proper, the flagship, and then was on the trustees for the University of Maine system for 7 universities. And it was there where I saw that I don't think the next generation had the same opportunity I had in the state, particularly from rural Maine, and it wasn't affordable to live here anymore. And that's core to my mission for why I jumped out to want to run for governor. So like, how do I translate my success in the private sector into this? One is, as a MedTech innovator, I've had to deeply understand the healthcare system. And one of the largest part of the budget in Maine state is our healthcare system, is our healthcare budget. And it's the part where I think most Mainers would feel frustrated by the lack of access to care that they have. And so in some towns you call 911 and no one shows up. In my case, I've been able to take innovations from centers like Boston and bring them out to rural places like Patton, Maine. And so I think I'm well suited to go tackle those challenges. Two is, second largest part of the budget is education. With the University of Maine system background and on the trustees and looking out there, I also understand the major players and how education should change and how it should be different in the state. So you'll see a theme here of understanding the heritage, being an innovator, and being able to lead us into the new future, right? Like I think in education, like I know that well. And then back to where I started with the paper mills, I worked in, I'm using this line that I can talk to you about sawmills or software. We're in the middle of this fourth industrial revolution with AI and the reindustrialization of America that's going on right now. And my background on the opportunity job side can lead us from the heritage and build on it to the future where the world's going and do it in a way that puts Maine on the map, that we are a place of innovation. And so I think all those things are good. And then finally, I just actually had this conversation right before this with someone that said, "Oh, and you don't talk enough about your leadership style, right? Like you don't talk enough about like how you would lead and how you'd build a team." And I'm like, okay, that's good feedback, because with MedRhythms, we've built the people are policy, right? The team is the one that gets things done, and we've hired great people. We've hired them around cultural pillars, which I would bring to how I lead state government, around people first, excellence always, and action focused. And to me, that's you bring in people that care about the mission and then care about their fellow employees, and they trust each other and they build trust. And I know in politics and state government that's hard to do, but nothing's ever impossible, right? So we're going to fight that. Excellence always. You know, we built a new industry at MedRhythms, so we needed to be excellent. Here, we're taking care of 1.4 million people that are in the state of Maine. We got to strive for excellence for them, right? And with them at the center, and then action focus. We live in a world that changes every single day, and it changes more rapidly than the day before. And the worst thing you can do is nothing, because action gets you in the game. It understands when you're doing the right and the wrong thing. And we need to leap and start doing things. And that's the style I'd bring into the lead.
I think that is very impressive, and it shows that you've led before. You were tapped into the past and history of Maine, and more importantly, you're tapped into the needs of the people of Maine. And the next step to that of understanding leadership, and then is evolution. And what was right for Maine in the past may not be right for Maine in the future. So understanding those different pillars sounds like a great recipe for success. And definitely was a nice way, the way you bridge your background in MedTech, in leadership, into what you're going to do now. Now, there are a few things that you brought up when looking at the future of Maine, and I was doing my research,
I
that
love it. Yeah.
were very, very important, and not just to Maine, but to a lot of the places in the United States. One thing I saw a couple times was Maine has an aging population.
Yeah.
How does that play into some of the things that you see are necessary for Maine? And then after the follow up would be, how do you make sure those people that you said may not have the same outcomes as you, the young people, how do you retain them and make sure they're taken care of too?
All right. Well, there's somewhat interconnected answers, but let's take them in series, right? So Maine happens to be the oldest state in the country, median age. We're 44. Yeah. Iowa is the second, I think. We're neck and neck with Iowa, right? What what happens when your demographics are like that is you start to notice like really basic workforce issues, right? Like it's hard to find a plumber and electrician in some parts of Maine. It's hard to staff nurses. It's hard to staff CNAs. It's hard to like find people to be in EMS and firefighters and all of these things. And so, the only solution I have for this for the long term, well, there's some of it is like, well, we need to make sure that the workforce we does have go into some critical areas, right? That are here, and like we reward those and we try to attract those there. That's fine. But the long-term and medium-term solution is we need to grow the economy and attract talent into the state. And without doing that, we're always going to be, and we'll make do, because we always make do, but we're always going to be in this sort of like trying to do more with less scenario, with less workforce, with less people, with less resources. And so it's actually interesting out there, Jonathan, because people don't like change. And so like when I initially come out and say like, I want to grow the economy and I want to attract people here and I want to do these things, I want to raise prosperity, you do get some friction from people saying, well, whoa, and like, I don't want a lot of people to move in. I like it how it is. I like how it, how it exists today. But I think the fact of the matter is, with the aging population described, if you don't put in the measures that do that, you're basically making a choice for it to get worse over time. And if people are okay with that choice, okay, fine. Like like people can have a right to vote for what they want, but I think there's a potential out there to jumpstart the economy, like create companies that create a lot of jobs, that attract talent in, that sell things across borders, that then raise prosperity for all Mainers, all the while making it affordable to live here. And so there's no specifics, I think, there. That's more philosophical, right? Like, how do you do that? Well, some of it is the basics, right? The blocking and tackling. Like it's hard to get DEP permits here. We're the third highest energy place in the country. Our schools, the results haven't been great, and it's lack of access in healthcare, right? So there's like a recipe of like, okay, this isn't perfect. We got to work on those, hyper focus and do that. But for a small state like Maine, and you teed this up a little bit earlier, you then need to double down on places where you have competitive advantage. So we've gone from 5 to 10,000 jobs in life science, which is everything but pharma, basically, in Maine, is how we define life science. And so it's really not life. It's like MedTech and diagnostics and like all these things. But there's a cluster there, and there's talent that works here remotely, and there's a willingness for like risk capital to go to work. I've seen it in my company. We have 60 million of it. And we should build a strategy around that because we can create outside impact. Coastline I mentioned earlier is helpful when the largest national security concern in the United States is boat building capacity. Maritime innovation is another place where we should create thousands of jobs. And then the next generation of things to do with trees, we're 92% forest in Maine. So advanced forest products are there. Build a strategy that market the strategy, attract companies to start here and build here will be how we get out of this mess in the medium.
That makes a ton of sense. And I see what you're saying. Those things are connected, because how do you retain young people? Jobs, opportunities are a great way to retain those young people.
They got to see themselves having a better future here, right? And so you can retain the ones you have, and then you can attract new ones in with that. And you market that message really well. And it won't take long for that flywheel to get going. And it's like gold rush, Maine's the place to be, everyone. Let's go there. That would be my dream headline in the future, I think.
I love it. And I think you have the makings for it with the different industries that you can bring in. Another thing that you brought up in your literature was around, there has been an epidemic across the nation when it comes to opioids. Now, I know you do have a background that touches the medical world. How do you plan to make sure that Maine isn't continuously hurt by the opioid epidemic?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, a short story here before I dive in. Growing up, my best friend from high school was this guy by the name of Jordan Anderson. And Jordan and I sort of took divergent paths as we graduated. And he kind of like went down a slope where he got into like drug use and abuse, and it was really difficult to watch. And it was 15, 20 plus years of that. And then by the miracle of God, I think, which actually probably, he discovered this program that is a faith-based recovery program that is basically like, let's pray, let's dive deep into the Bible, and let's like get jacked, right? They work out twice a day or whatever, right? So it's like faith and exercise mixed. And the guy, Jordan, has been clean for over 18 months now. He's back. He's going to become a minister. And this program has like a high, above average success rate for that. And I say that because, we've had a lot of people that didn't have opportunity that went down that path that, they were not inherently bad people and drugs took a hold of them, that there's a paths to recovery if we just enable them and open them up. And right. So like some of the epidemic is like, let's fix and cure people that have addiction. The other part of it is let's make it so we have a strong foundation in mental health, right? So people don't self-medicate, right? Like along the way and get caught up in the wrong cycles, and treat them early and often, including we need to be really careful with technology with teenagers, right? Because like that dopamine cycle they get in with social media leads to anxiety and despair that doesn't always lead to drugs, but it's a slope that's not good. So mental health is really important. We've actually had, was wild for me to learn about. We have 500 homes in Maine that have been acquired by the Chinese mafia or Chinese affiliated that grow illegal marijuana. It's legal to sell marijuana in the state, but they grow it illegally and they flood the market with it. But we haven't got our handle on these networks, and we need to work with as many of the federal agencies, the U.S. attorneys and others to carve back some of these large networks that have popped up in rural Maine. And it's a wild story. Like if someone has the time for it, that it was unbelievable to me until I started fact checking some more. So like cutting the supply, and then finally, we have not kept up with the funding to appropriately staff like law enforcement in the states. And I think we need to do that. And so like there's a range of it's like supply and demand issue for me. It's like cut the suppliers, like don't have ready citizens that get to a point where like they need to like self-medicate, and then cure it on the other side are the ways I think you start to attack it. And then long term, if the plan works, that we're creating more hope and opportunity for the future, it's less people are going to get into that cycle. I mean, it's a complex issue, Jonathan, as you know. So there's a lot there, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very complex issue, and it's not going to be a fits all, and it's not going to be a silver bullet either. I
And that's the
think,
thing about many of this is actually it's interesting, John. So I already cut you off.
no, no, please do.
I'm out there. I'm an engineer. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to imagine the future. I'm running for governor, and everyone wants you to put your solution in a neat soundbite, right? Like, great, let's do it. But all these issues, the solutions aren't sound biteable, right? Like they're like thorny and they're messy, and they like that for me is like really fun to figure out. But the messaging of what the solution is for the general public needs to be sound biteable. And if all the critics out there can take that and find 27 reasons why the soundbite won't work, whereas down below the surface is where all the work has to happen. And like for me, like that's where I thrive, is in that messy place to solve those problems.
Sure, and yeah, I think that's just a tough part about the beast that you're running into. It's like you
Well,
want it
it's,
to
well, it's
be,
how the game works, right? So you got to
yeah,
play the game that way. We're gonna do it. We're gonna go do it. But for the audience out there, we know these issues are more complicated than we make them out.
for sure. And you have to have a multi-pronged approach if you want success. And I like the way you went through the different factors and arenas in which it's like supply to the mental health of the citizen,
Yeah,
and to law enforcement. But then you also tied it back saying, if we continue to create prosperity and opportunities for Mainers, it should be less people that can fall to the wayside a bit because of lack of economic opportunity.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we've seen across the nation that has been a big determinant of drug use in hard times. So
yeah.
I definitely like that. Now, one thing that you mentioned in your literature that was very, very topical was, and I want to make sure, and please correct me because it was is a very quotable thing. It is not Maine is not supposed to be a vacation land of the wealthy,
Yes, yes.
was the quote. And with the, I think it's Rhode Island did something like a Taylor Swift tax that they're thinking of putting together. So what does that quote mean, and how are you working to make sure
Well,
that Maine is a place for a working class family?
it's interesting, right? And for me, that comes back to the affordability issue that I started. Like it's like opportunity for the next generation, and affordability for people like my uncle Thump, who lives in Patton, Maine, still, are things I care a lot about. Here's a fact about Maine that as was stunning to me when I started digging into like the problems and solutions. The percentage of second homes in the state is 20% of the housing stock. The national average at a state is 5% or 4%. So it's 4 to 5 times the national average. And so it is vacation land for the wealthy. And that has driven up a lot of our home prices, which is another issue. And it has made it unaffordable to live where people work oftentimes. And, our wages have remained stagnant in the state over a bunch of time. It's the 50th out of 50 wage growth the last few years. And so it's not good. And so like, how do I think about that? Well, this is not a policy proclamation. And if anyone's listening that's moving in that lives here for 20, in that 20%, like like don't take this as exactly the direction, but we got to find ways to diversify revenue. Right now, our Mainers are fourth highest tax citizens in the country. Like there's got to be ways, and there are, to share some of the burden of this great state with those that are here maybe 4 or 5 months a year. So I think that's one that's on the rebalancing of how we do taxes side. Two is for the people out there that didn't like what I had to say, right? On that one, like that's 20%. uh, I want you to look at these communities as places to invest in because we have great entrepreneurs and great ideas, and you might come here as like you because you like it in the summer, but this is going to be a place that the economy is going to be dynamic in the future, and it's going to hire local Mainers, and you're going to want to invest, and you're going to want to see it happen. And if you're the type that wants that, we want you here. And then finally, for working class Mainers, the number one complaint I hear about is our energy costs in the state. We have the third highest energy costs in the nation. We need to do complex business development deals to buy lower cost energy from Canada or from New York or potentially build our own nuclear. And that needs to be a focus of the next administration because that is that working class Mainers almost as much as anything out there. And so that's when I say that it's like this is a land of opportunity, land of jobs, where we're going to grow everyone's bottom line, particularly the working class. And people need to see it as that, not just the place they come for, June through September to hang out in the ocean.
That's a tough one. 4 to 5 times at the national average in second homes. That creates a couple of issues from a taxation standpoint that you addressed. But then also, yeah, from a housing standpoint, how does
Housing.
that affect your? I'm sure those houses that they're buying aren't cheap, and they're affecting the property values of other places and the property
We
taxes.
have doubled. The property values have doubled since 2020.
Since 2020.
Yeah, doubled. Like, the median income to buy a new home in Maine is somewhere around 105 to 110,000 now. So it's priced out a lot of people, including, and that doesn't include the money you need down, right? So if you think about the next generation, which I do, and like the American dream of home ownership has become a dream in some cases for them because the wages are flat, the housing prices have doubled. You need the money down. You come from a first generation college student background like myself, and you're building it yourself. You're going to get, and you have student loans. You're going to get into your fees before you can consider buying a home. And that's a challenge. One of the major issues in this market, and not to, this is back to what I said I don't like to do, but the oversimplification is it's a supply issue. If you look at units per household in Maine, we're about the ratio is like 1.05 right now. It's supposed to be above 1.1. You get above 1.1, then it's a healthy market where if you buy something, you can sell something. If you sell something, you can buy something. And like there's some liquidity and movement in the market. Below that 1.1, it's very stagnant and like prices start to like go up pretty rapidly. We need 42,000 homes today on a 650,000 home basis. Like today to make that ratio happen. But if you remember the fact that we're the oldest state in the country, people need to move in. So that stock needs to grow even more. And with housing, we have what I would call a twofold issue, which is a regulatory issue. It's hard to get permits in certain places. And so like the timelines like stretch out. So it's hard to get capital to come in. Right. And it's hard to build the units. And so we need to streamline that. And then if you get to certain parts of Maine, they say, well, look, oh, and like I can get as many permits as you want, as fast as you want, but I just can't get a plumber, or an electrician. And we have a major workforce issue there, which we talked about as a symptom of this demographic situation. So we're going to have to look at innovative solutions like custom modular and other things to solve for some of that. So housing, it's sort of like the housing needs to happen in parallel with creating jobs and opportunity. If you don't, like that's going to be the bottleneck or the rate limiter to like our growth as a state.
Wow. That's very interesting. If I'm hearing it, and I want to parrot it back for myself and for the viewers, in certain places, it's permeating like a kind of a red tape issue.
Yeah.
It takes too long to get from permit to actually building, and that's going to scare away capital. As we know, developers and their performers are very, very tight. And so the time value of money is very important. But now, to other parts of Maine, it sounds like you have the red tape kind of lifted, but it's just getting the talent, the people to actually do the things necessary to build. No, that I
Well, and it gets even more complicated a little bit, and not to get is There's
Let's do it.
state red tape, right? Like DEP and DOT and traffic surveys and these things. And then Maine, we love, we love, and I'm not going to get in the way of our local control, but every town and city has its own problems, and some are better, some are worse, right? And so it's it's a multifactorial equation, and it's sort of like, what the answer is, we need to do about 10 things immediately to like loosen this up. It's not like tomorrow I'm going to be like, Biddeford is going to build 5,000 units and we're just going to build it here and we're going to take over the land. And like, that's just how it works. You got to like loosen up the system and, in multiple spots.
Wow. Yeah, no, I definitely hear that across the nation. And I think it's so interesting. We all know that there's a housing crisis, like the big capital letter housing crisis. But then you break it down by state and then by city, and the variables that are just so different. And each locality and each region have their own reasons for it. So no, thank you for breaking that down.
But it's also this culturally,
Mm.
which when I think about like government, you know, actually, have you worked with a lot of lawyers before?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. When you find a lawyer that's like, okay, well, that's not going to work and that's not going to work. And here's, and like, I don't want to get near any risk. Right.
Mhm.
Then I'll find a lawyer that says like, okay, how can we get to yes? And like, and not, obviously you don't want to break the law and you don't want to do anything sketchy, but there's paths to get to yes. Right. Like our culture and the government, my government will be like, how, like we need to enforce the rules and we need to make sure that like bad actors don't do bad things. But how can we help people get to yes on things? And I think it's hard to conceptualize, right? Until you feel it. But like you experience someone that helps you do that, like it's a much different customer experience and really goes a long ways.
For sure. And yeah, I think sometimes you just have to bring people to the table. It's like, we're going to get this done. Now,
Yeah.
how do we get this done
Yeah.
versus, we want to be the regulator and figure out what are the ways that this isn't going to work out. So I definitely think it is a mindset
I was
shift.
talking to a manufacturer of French fries this week, and it was a good reminder of this because he had built a plant in northern Maine, and I'm probably giving it away because I'm like narrowing it down, but it was supposed to take 3 years to build the plant, right? Like that was the spec, that was the plan, whatever. And it took them 11 months to build this plant. And I asked him, I said, well, what was the secret to success? And it was exactly what you said was one of that. It was like good team. We met on Fridays. And when you drilled down, it was the like, okay, bottleneck, how do we overcome it? Right question. Not a like, just point at the bottleneck. It's like, how do we overcome it the fastest and do it the right way? And that attitude added up can go a long ways.
For sure, for sure. And it sounds like that's something that you want to do to make sure. Obviously, like you said, you don't want bad actors to do bad things, but you can figure out ways to achieve and get to that. Yes, I think that can spur some things. Now this doesn't happen all the time, but Owen, I'm going to give you all the money in the world, all the time in the world, and all the resources, workers, whatever you need to address one main issue for Maine. What would that challenge be?
All the money,
All the money that you need,
all the time,
all the time,
all the workers.
all the workers.
I love this question. My mind is going to like the parable about like, that we hear when we're kids, which is like, you catch someone a fish that's good and you give it to them, but you teach them how to fish, you get payoff for generations. And so, we are investing in the 4 fastest growing areas of the economy. We're attracting all the top companies in from there. We're making sure we have density in places and we have rules against full sprawl because I want to keep Maine sort of natural. And we are setting up we're taking the money and setting up an investment fund that will fund the state government so we don't have to pay taxes. Okay.
Nice.
Now we're set up for prosperity for the future, and we can tackle things like health. Like I actually took all your money and put it into things that create more money. And, we're tackling things like access to healthcare. And now, we're a hub for shipping for the Arctic. And people are educated for free. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we can do, but it's really at winning in the places where the fastest growing parts of the economy where we can compete in will create prosperity for decades.
Nice. I can appreciate that. If you can bring in the industry, especially industry in like growing areas of the economy, how can that trickle down and invest back into your government, which invests into the people? I like that.
Well, it's interesting because to me, it's like all about, and obviously it needs to not get concentrated in like a couple of people, right? Like, which actually with capitalism, which is supposed to have competitive markets. So there's not one or two major winners, that people are competing all the time, and all the wealth doesn't get concentrated in one place, which, surprisingly, like, I'm against that. I'm for competitive markets, right? If we do that, we set that up, and you do it in ways where you sell things across state borders, you bring new dollars in, that raises prosperity for everyone. You actually just look at what's like Norway. Look at Norway. They literally struck oil, right? Like, they probably have the same design conditions as Maine. And that they're the richest country on earth, or one of them on the earth. But if you look at like dollars per person, pretty well distributed, good education systems, people like to live there. And they essentially found all the money in the world and have found out how to build that, right? And they've invested, like, they use that to invest in industry, society, and prosperity. And I think that's the route forward.
Wow, I definitely can appreciate that, and I definitely need to do my homework on Norway a little bit more. But I look forward to doing that.
I'm going to look up right now, richest country in the world, to make sure that I didn't make this up. Like, I want to be,
No,
yes.
I appreciate.
ChatGPT is giving me an answer here. So we're going to live talk about this. It's thinking about it. Okay. You know what? Norway is not the richest country in the world. So where is Norway?
Who?
Who won? Luxembourg. Does that count? I mean, that's sort of like a city state, right? It's one of the
Wow.
richest. It's one of the richest, and it's very similar to Maine. So we'll go with that.
There it is. There it is. Well, Owen, first and foremost, you handled the hot seat well. I think the questions that I asked were very, very pointed. Really wanted to dig into the vision for Maine and around not easy issues. We're talking about opioid crisis, education, housing, and understanding taxation for your people with second homes. So I definitely want to tip my hat to you there. Now, on an easier final
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
What is some advice you give to young people? About 50% of our viewers are around 18 to 24. They're either in school and they're thinking about public service, or they're in their career and looking to make their way into public service. What advice would you give to those young people?
Well, a few things. One is continue to refine your values and what really important to you and why. Right. I think when you're grounded in what you care about, how you want to operate, do you want to operate with integrity? I mean, hopefully the answer is yes, but like, what does that mean to you? And like, I think it's really important. So you can wake up in 30 years and say, I lived a life that I'm proud of. It's really easy to be incrementalist, where you start something, you do something that, one thing that leads you to another thing, that leads you to another thing. And like, and some day you wake up and you're not proud of who you've become, and you didn't intend to become this. So the values are really important, to check yourself against that and then communicate that to others. In mine, people first, excellence always, action focused. I add a humility for how I act and servant leadership in there, right? Personally, but communicate that to others so they can check you on that. Two is, when you start, your first thing you do, or when you start out in your career, particularly in a world like we're living today, you gotta land in a place where you can learn as much as possible, as fast as possible. Because you probably don't know what you really want to become and what you want to do. And you probably don't know what you're actually really good at and not good at. People don't figure that out. But if you get in a role where you're being pushed and you're learning and you're growing, and you can reflect on, I hated this part of it, I love this part of it, you can then refine back to this life that you're proud of, and then you can get happiness and like self-actualize, whatever the Maslow hierarchy of needs will drive you towards. So that's helpful. Three is, for you, out there, listeners, it's scary what's happening with AI, but I also love it for you because you're entering a workforce that Jonathan and I already have modes of operating. We have ways of thinking. We have processes that are about to be fully disrupted by what's happening with AI. And you're native to it with how you work now that it's been in your life, right, for the last couple of years. You can really add a lot of value to C-level executives, to anyone that comes along the way, based on how you have figured out how to be both productive and bring your full self into that setting. And so it's sort of like, know your values, learn as much as possible, and lean into where you have a competitive advantage and strength in the marketplace, because you do, and we need you to lead there. So those are some of the things I'd say to young people. It's not really to public service. That's just generally to where they would go. I think with public service, make sure, you screen people that you want to work with in situations against your values and what your North Star is. So even if someone puts you in a tough situation, you can know to say no and be proud of that when you go to bed at night.
I love that, values driven, and then understanding your competitive advantage. And to the young people, Owen hit the nail on the head. We've been doing ways for a very long time, and those ways are getting turned up on their head. And
We
you
got
guys
bad
are,
habits, Jonathan. Bad
yeah,
habits. Yeah.
right, and and then again, the North Star is so important. Like everyone has the right to work, retire, and invest in their own community. So it's like there's just something that whatever you're doing, how does that tie back to your North Stars? Oh,
Well,
and
I
I
have a
wanted to.
story there too, right? We're probably at time, but I remember at business school, and I was getting ready to graduate, and maybe it was a few months before, and there was a professor that showed a chart of like a 10-year reunion, like 70 or 80% of people were unhappy with their lives. And it struck me because my dad had to be a logger, right? Like to feed us. He had no choice, right? That was like, he was there. That's what he had to do. He was doing it. He got up every day and did it. He didn't really have a choice, even though he didn't complain about it. Graduated from a top program in school, whatever you're starting out in life. Some people out there might not have a choice. But if you do have a choice, I was like, why are humans so bad at choosing? Like what? And it's because you chase the wrong things, right? You don't have a North Star that you're looking after. You don't align with your values. You don't surround yourself with people you trust. That's why I started MedRhythms in the first place. One of them was like, we can help people improve their walking. I can do it with people I trust, and I can define the values. Let's go, right? Like I've not had a day of regret since then, and was not in that statistic, which really kept me up at night. And I think it's really important for young people to think about that. If you have the choice to do it, some of you don't. Like some of you need to work, and that's you're great members of society. But if you have the choice, choose wisely.
Choose wisely. I think that's a great way to end. Owen, from everyone here at Gentry, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time. I know you are going to be out campaigning and doing a lot of speaking tours, but I appreciate you taking that early stop with us and really not just giving us sound bites, but truly thinking through and being thoughtful about your answers. So I just wanted to say thank you. And then for all the viewers, again, this has been the Gentry Podcast. We have Owen McCarthy, who is running for governor of the great state of Maine. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great one.
Thanks, Jonathan.